next section I'm going to read is from section 3. And in this section, third generation Deepa is an immigration researcher, and she's been sent down to Orlando, Florida to help out with a case in which two brothers are discovered as actually being partners. So the partner's visa comes into question because he came to the U.S. under false pretenses. And she's going to talk a bit about when she walks into this detention center and speaks to them for the first time, but then also what it means in the context of her own growing up and her grandmother's struggle. So Deepa is the third generation. She is Lakshmi, who the perspective you just heard, the granddaughter of Lakshmi. Chapter 72. We entered the detention center, which was advertised like a hotel on the owner's website. The bottom line of turning a profit took precedence, however, as evidenced by the bareness of the real-life facility. A state-of-the-art electronic system was the one luxury the company pulled out, and our passes worked without hindrance. At the end of a long corridor sat the questioning room. I knew by then that because Pedro was not considered a legal spouse, he had jumped through countless hoops to be continually included in Jorge's proceedings. Carrie and I took an extra second of appreciation when we walked in and saw both men sitting together for our interview. Pedro and Jorge looked incredibly calm despite having had their lives turned upside down. Even so, the turmoil of the past few months had greatly aged both of them. Their spirit was not reflected in the aging process, and they greeted Carrie and me with lively handshakes and a kiss on the cheek. I gave myself a moment to organize my thoughts before launching into my first question. 3 years as a glorified paper writer was not adequate preparation for looking this powerful story in the eyes. Pedro noticed my nerves and calmed me down. "It's okay. Take your time," he said. I knew then why he was such a popular professor. Summoning my normal confidence, I launched into the slate of questions the legal team had prepared for us. Pedro and Jorge answered almost verbatim to what we had already recorded. An hour in, we had not uncovered any new points. Carrie stood up and thanked the Ramirezes for their time. She didn't realize I hadn't moved from my seat until she was at the exit to leave. "Coming?" she asked me. "Could I ask you a few questions in private?" I asked Pedro and Jorge. Such a request was unconventional and probably not allowed, but Carrie and I had grown close in our time together, and she knew how much the fate of these two men meant to me. She excused herself from the room without protest. "Why didn't you apply for asylum when you first came to the States?" I asked Jorge. He smiled, thinking I had lost track of our conversation. We had already covered that question. "As we said, we didn't know it was possible," Jorge replied. "Right, I know. I mean, why didn't you ask anyone when you got here? Why didn't you ask what options you had?" I clarified. I saw I caught them off guard. No one had yet bothered to ask this very obvious question. For the first time in months, Pedro and Jorge conferred with each other on how best to phrase their response. "We were scared," Jorge finally replied. "Why?" I asked, though I knew the answer. "When I got the job in the States, I thought Jorge and I could finally live openly as a couple. I soon realized hatred of gay people was not limited to Mexico," Pedro said. Homophobic rhetoric, blatant acts of violence, little legal protection, and a generally intolerant society quickly told Pedro and Jorge that the United States was not the progressive paradise they had been hoping for when they decided to uproot their lives. "Then why not move back to Mexico or break up?" I continued. "Being apart from mi amor was like not having the left side of my body. Other people were just crutches. It wasn't the same," Pedro replied. For Jorge, it went further. He wasn't just a gay man in Mexico. He was a poor man, an uneducated man, and a dark-skinned man. "Some people treated me worse than their dogs," he said. The way Jorge's body rocked to the sadness of his life story reminded me precisely of Ava whenever she talked about her experience growing up. Through the many times I had seen Ava recount her struggles to others, I knew the emotion that stems from a life of poverty was enough to melt the coldest spirit. "America gave me a start in some ways," Jorge said. "Yes, and in the 30 years I've been here, the law came very far. It just didn't come far enough," Pedro offered. "Was it worth the risk?" I pressed. I knew it was an unfair question. Had I asked them the same a few months prior, their candid answer most certainly would have been yes. Facing the turmoil before them, hindsight was not a luxury to evaluate their choices. "How did you know to take that risk?" I asked. I asked yet another impossible question. Pedro and Jorge did not have another option, even though their opposition argued they did. Neither of them had intended to be the poster children to call attention to the inadequacies of our immigration system. All they knew was that their time together on this earth was limited and that their love was not a crime. Submitting to the wills of society when society is so inherently wrong is not something many people must face, Pedro explained. Pedro and Jorge had not chosen this risk. This risk had chosen them.